Have you ever felt the weight of unsaid words pressing against your chest? A moment where silence was a choice, but not the right one? A second where the world seemed to pause, waiting for you to speak, but you said nothing, and in that silence, something was lost, perhaps forever. The great thinkers of history understood the power of silence, but they also knew its dangers. Seneca warned that speech is the mirror of the mind. What does it say about a man who never speaks when he should? Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, wielded words like a blade, sometimes with precision, sometimes with restraint. But even he knew, there are moments when silence is a betrayal. But when should a man speak? When is silence not wisdom but cowardice? When does holding your tongue cost more than letting it loose? These are not ordinary questions. They are the choices that shaped kings and fools alike. Today, we uncover the 6 situations where you must never, under any circumstance, remain silent. Because in these moments, your voice is not just a sound, it is your power. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Every like, subscribe, helps us continue our mission of sharing knowledge, and leave a comment below and share your opinion on these situations, or tell me which one resonates with you the most. Ready to unlock more wisdom? Let's get started. Situation 1. When injustice demands your voice. Silence has a price. Sometimes that price is justice, sometimes it is dignity, and sometimes it is a piece of your own soul. There comes a moment in every man's life when he stands at the crossroads of comfort and courage. The world whispers, "Stay quiet. It's not your battle. Let someone else fight." But deep inside, something stirs. A voice buried beneath years of conditioning, fear, or indifference. That voice is your conscience. Ignore it, and it fades. Obey it, and you may set something greater into motion than you can imagine. The Stoics believed in virtue as the highest good. Courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance, these were the pillars of a life well lived. But what is justice if it is silent? What is courage if it remains locked behind closed lips? Seneca once wrote, "He who does not prevent a crime when he can, encourages it." Injustice, no matter how small, festers in the shadows of silence. A man who watches without speaking is complicit in the crime. You have seen it before. A man is wrong before your eyes. Maybe it is a coworker taking the blame for a mistake he did not make. Maybe it is a stranger humiliated in public for no reason but another's cruelty. Maybe it is a lie told so convincingly that it begins to shape reality itself. The moment hangs in the air, the world waits, and you remain silent. Why? Because speaking up carries risk. Because silence is easier. Because the world has convinced you that it is not your place. But here's the truth. Every time you bite your tongue in the face of injustice, you train yourself to be indifferent to it. And one day, when injustice comes for you, the world will meet your silence with its own. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled the greatest empire on earth, understood this well. He believed that we are all bound together as parts of a greater whole. To turn away from another's suffering is to turn away from the very nature of humanity itself. What injures the hive injures the bee. The suffering of one is the suffering of all. Does this mean you must fight every battle? No. But it does mean that when your voice can tip the scales toward justice, when your words can shield another from harm, when truth itself stands on the edge of a knife, you do not get to be silent. You may not always win. The world is not always kind to those who speak the truth. But even if your voice shakes, even if your words fail, the act of speaking alone carves a mark upon the universe. There is no honor in silence when justice calls for sound. There is no virtue in quiet when courage begs for words. And if you will not speak for another, who will speak for you? Situation 2. When your boundaries are crossed. There is a kind of silence that is more dangerous than any spoken lie. It is the silence that allows others to chip away at who you are, piece by piece, until nothing remains but the shadow of a man who once stood firm. To be silent when your boundaries are crossed is to give permission. It is to say, take more, disrespect me again, I will not resist. But the truth is, every time you allow someone to step over the line, that line moves. And before you know it, you are standing in a place you no longer recognize, wondering how you got there. Epictetus, the slave-turned-philosopher, understood this better than most. He was a man who had no choice but to endure suffering, his body broken, his freedom stripped away. But even he knew that the most sacred thing a man owns is his mind, his dignity, and his self-respect. And these are things that must never be surrendered in silence. Perhaps it begins with something small. A joke at your expense, masked in humor, but laced with disrespect. A demand that takes advantage of your kindness. A favor expected, not asked. A decision made for you, without your voice in the matter. You tell yourself it is nothing. You do not want conflict. You do not want to be difficult. So you say nothing. But what starts as a whisper of discomfort soon becomes a roar of resentment. And here is the truth. Resentment is nothing but unspoken boundaries that have been crossed too many times. A man who respects himself does not fear the discomfort of defending his lines. He understands that a boundary is only as strong as the voice that upholds it. It is not rudeness, it is not aggression. It is the quiet, firm declaration. This is where I stand, and you will not move me. Many will test your silence. They will push to see how far you will bend before you break. They will mistake your patience for weakness, your kindness for submission. And every time you do not speak, you teach them that they are right. But a man who speaks, calmly, firmly, without apology, teaches the world something else. He teaches them that he is not to be moved. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." If standing up for yourself feels uncomfortable, good. It means you are learning to hold your ground. It means you are carving out the space that belongs to you and you alone. And here is what the world does not tell you. Those who test your silence will respect your voice. Those who push against your boundaries will be forced to acknowledge them. And those who do not, they were never meant to remain in your life to begin with. So speak. When your boundaries are crossed, when your dignity is threatened, when the world demands your silence, let them hear your voice. Not in anger, not in rage, but in quiet, unwavering certainty. Because a man who does not defend his ground will soon find he has none left to stand on. Situation 3. When the truth is in danger. There will come a day when the truth stands at the edge of a precipice, looking down into the abyss of lies, half-truths, and comfortable illusions. And in that moment, the only thing keeping it from falling will be the voices of those who dare to speak. It is easy to stay silent when a lie benefits the many and the truth serves only a few. It is tempting to turn away when deception brings peace and honesty brings chaos. But the man who remains silent in the face of falsehood is not merely a spectator. He becomes an accomplice. The Stoics understood that truth is not a matter of convenience. Marcus Aurelius, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But what he did not say, and what every wise man must come to understand, is that there is an equal danger in what is left unsaid. History is not written by those who speak the truth. It is written by those who speak the loudest. Lies have a way of taking root when they are left unchallenged. They spread, twisting reality, reshaping perception, until what was once clear becomes blurred beyond recognition. And when the truth finally resurfaces, it is often too late, because by then, the world has moved on. You have seen this before. A story is told, but it is not the whole story. A fact is twisted just enough to fit a convenient narrative. A lie is spoken with such confidence that it becomes indistinguishable from reality. And you know the truth. You hold it in your hands like a fragile ember, knowing that if you do not protect it, it will be snuffed out. But the fear creeps in. What will they say? What if they turn against you? What if the weight of truth is too much for the world to bear? And so, you let it pass. You tell yourself it is not your battle. You tell yourself that someone else will speak, but no one does. And that is how the truth dies. Not in battle, not in resistance, but in the quiet, comfortable apathy of those who chose silence. Epictetus, the slave who became a philosopher, had every reason to remain silent. He lived in a world where speaking out could mean death, where truth was not always welcomed. And yet, he spoke. He taught that the only thing a man truly owns is his integrity, his ability to stand by what he knows to be right, even when the world stands against him. But speaking the truth is not just about the grand moments. It is not always about exposing corruption or changing the course of history. Sometimes it is in the small things, a lie told to protect someone's ego, an untruth accepted because it is easier than questioning it, a silence kept because honesty feels too heavy a burden. And here's the danger. Every time you allow a lie to go unchallenged, you make room for more. You pave the way for deception to become the norm. And one day, when you need the truth the most, it will not be there, because long ago, you helped bury it. A man of principle does not raise his voice in anger or self-righteousness. He does not shout to be heard over the noise. He simply speaks, calmly, firmly, with unwavering conviction. He understands that the truth does not need embellishment, nor does it need permission. It simply needs a voice. So when you see the truth standing alone, when you hear the whisper of dishonesty creeping through the cracks, when the world asks you to remain silent for the sake of comfort, remember this. Silence is easy, but it is not harmless. Lies are loud, but they are not invincible. And the truth, no matter how fragile, will always find its strength in the voices of those who refuse to let it die. Speak, not because it is easy, not because it is safe, but because if you do not, no one else will. Situation 4. When your loved ones need guidance. There are moments in life when silence is not just an absence of words, but an absence of leadership. A man does not speak only for himself. He speaks for those who look to him for wisdom, for strength, for direction when they are lost. And yet, so many men choose to remain silent when their voice is needed most. Perhaps it is because they fear being wrong. Perhaps they believe that those they love must find their own way. Perhaps they assume that their words will not make a difference. But here's the truth. Silence in the presence of someone who needs guidance is not wisdom. It is neglect. A father watches his son struggle with a choice, but he does not speak. He tells himself that the boy must learn on his own. A friend spirals downward, making decisions that will destroy him, but no one stops him. A brother stands at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take, but those who could advise him choose instead to say nothing, afraid of overstepping, afraid of conflict. And so these men walk alone, not because they had no one to guide them, but because those who could have spoken chose not to. The Stoics understood that wisdom is meant to be shared. Seneca wrote, "What progress have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." But wisdom kept only for oneself is a selfish thing. The greatest gift a man can give is the hard-earned lessons of his own life. But guidance is not control. It is not about forcing someone to walk a path they do not wish to take. It is about lighting the way, making clear the dangers ahead, and offering a hand when the road becomes too difficult. It is about being the voice that says, "I have been here before. Let me show you what I have learned." Think of the regrets that haunt men in their later years. They do not regret the moments they offered guidance. They regret the times they remained silent. They regret the words they never spoke, the wisdom they never shared, the moments they could have changed a life but chose instead to watch from a distance. A man does not have to be a father to lead. He does not have to be a teacher to impart wisdom. He does not have to be a master of all things to offer guidance. He only needs to be willing to speak, to share his experiences, his insights, his warnings. There will be times when those you love will not want to hear your words. They may reject them. They may resist them. They may walk their own path regardless. But a man speaks not because he seeks obedience, but because he seeks truth. He offers guidance not because it will always be accepted, but because it must be given. And one day, when the lessons have settled, when time has done its work, those who once turned away will remember. They will hear your words echoing in their minds when they need them most. And in that moment, your voice will have done what it was meant to do. It will have guided them, even in your absence. So do not remain silent when those you love are searching for direction. Do not hold back the lessons you have fought to learn. Do not assume that your words have no weight. Because in the end, the greatest responsibility of a man is not just to live wisely, but to ensure that his wisdom does not die with him. Speak, because someone is listening, even if they do not realize it yet. Situation 5. When your heart speaks, but your lips remain closed. There is a silence that wounds deeper than any spoken word. It is the silence of a man who feels something powerful, something true, something real, but swallows it down and locks it away. It is the silence of love unspoken, of admiration withheld, of gratitude left to wither in the shadow of pride or fear. It is the silence of a man who convinces himself that there will always be another time, another moment, another chance. But time is not kind to those who wait too long to speak. How many men have stood at the graves of those they loved, tormented not by words they regretted saying, but by the ones they never said? How many have let years slip by, watching the people in their lives drift further away, not because of anger, not because of betrayal, but because they never spoke the words that would have drawn them closer? The Stoics taught us discipline, control, restraint, but they did not teach coldness. Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor, wrote not of indifference but of love, of the deep and abiding connections that make life meaningful. He wrote, "Do not be ashamed of being helped. The task of life is more than just one man's burden. To need others is not weakness. To care is not vulnerability. To express love, admiration, or appreciation is not to give away power. It is to affirm what is true." Yet so many men stay silent. They withhold their affection, believing that emotions should be private, that expressing them diminishes their strength. They let the words die on their tongues, words that could have mended wounds, strengthened bonds, changed the course of a relationship forever. A father who never tells his son he is proud. A man who loves a woman but never finds the courage to say it. A friend who admires another but assumes they already know. A son who respects his father but waits too long to tell him, only to find that time has stolen the chance. And why? Because of fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of vulnerability. Fear that words once spoken cannot be taken back. But here is the truth. Silence is just as permanent. And where words have the power to heal, to inspire, to bring people closer, silence only creates distance. Epictetus taught that we must speak what is within us, that our words must align with what we hold in our hearts. He understood that the measure of a man is not in how much he keeps to himself, but in how much he gives to the world around him. So what is it that you have left unsaid? Who is it that you assume already knows how you feel? What words have you buried under layers of hesitation? Do not wait for perfect moments. Do not assume that those you love will always be there to hear what you have to say. Do not let fear rob you of the chance to express what is true. Because the harshest regrets are not for words spoken in honesty, but for the ones that never found the courage to leave your lips. Speak while there's still time. Situation 6. When your own soul demands to be heard. There is a silence more dangerous than all others. It is not the silence before injustice, nor the silence that lets falsehood flourish, nor even the silence that distances us from those we love. It is the silence a man keeps with himself. The silence that buries his own truth so deep within him that he begins to forget it was ever there. A man can go his entire life without ever speaking his own desires, his own purpose, his own pain. He tells himself that it is easier this way, that to question, to challenge, to ask himself what he truly wants would be to unravel everything he has built. So he stays quiet, he plays his role, he follows the script that was written for him by the expectations of others. He lives a life that is not his own, but one that is acceptable, safe, convenient. And yet, there is a voice inside him that will not die. It whispers in the moments between distractions. It lingers in the silence of the night. It speaks through the weight in his chest, the tension in his body, the restlessness in his soul. It is the voice of the man he was meant to become. And it is asking, "Why have you abandoned me?" Marcus Aurelius warned against betraying one's own nature. Do not live as though you have 1,000 years ahead of you. Fate is at your elbow. Make yourself good while life and power are still yours. What does this mean? It means that a man must not silence himself when his soul is crying out for something more. He must not deny his own purpose, his own passions, his own truth, simply because the world tells him to be satisfied with less. How many men wake up one day to realize that they have spent their entire lives in quiet resignation? How many have ignored their calling until it was too late to answer? How many have convinced themselves that their dreams, their ambitions, their desires were foolish, irresponsible, unattainable, only to find that the true foolishness was in denying them in the first place? Seneca wrote, "Life is not short. We waste much of it." A man does not lack time. He lacks the courage to claim it for himself. He spends years waiting for the right moment, waiting for permission, waiting for certainty. But life does not offer certainty. It does not wait for readiness. It moves relentlessly, whether you choose to move with it or not. So what is it that you have silenced within yourself? What truths have you buried beneath the noise of obligations, expectations, and fears? What would you say? What would you demand if you finally gave yourself permission to speak? There is no one coming to give you that permission. No one will wake up one day and say, "Now you may be who you were meant to be." That choice belongs to you alone. But it cannot be made in silence. It must be declared. It must be spoken, first to yourself, then to the world. A man who refuses to speak his own truth becomes a stranger to himself. He drifts through life unfulfilled, haunted by a vague sense that something is missing. But the only thing missing is his own voice. The voice that should have said, "This is what I want. This is who I am. And I will not apologize for it." So speak. Speak the truth that you have denied yourself for too long. Speak the words that will set you free. Speak before the years slip through your fingers like water, leaving you only with the silence of regret. Because the greatest tragedy is not to lose your voice in the world. It is to lose it within yourself. Final thoughts. Silence is a double-edged sword. There are times when it is a sign of wisdom, when it allows a man to observe, to learn, to restrain himself from speaking in anger or ignorance. But there are also times when silence is a betrayal of truth, of duty, of love, of oneself. A man must know the difference. He must understand that there are moments in life when his voice is not just a choice, but an obligation. He must recognize that his words carry weight, not just in the ears of others, but in the shaping of his own destiny. The Stoics did not teach passivity. They did not teach men to retreat into silence when speaking was necessary. They taught courage. They taught action. They taught that a life well lived is one in which a man aligns his words with his values, his voice with his convictions. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and rose to become one of the greatest teachers of philosophy, knew what it meant to be silenced. Yet he wrote, "If your choices are beautiful, so too will you be." But a man's choices are not only in what he does, they are in what he says, in what he refuses to let go unchallenged, in what he refuses to leave unspoken. Every day, you will be faced with moments where you must decide whether to remain silent or to speak. You will encounter injustice that begs to be confronted. You will see the truth at risk of being erased. You will watch those you love struggle in the darkness, searching for guidance. You will feel your own heart urging you to speak the words you have long withheld. And you will hear, deep within yourself, the voice that is asking to be heard, the voice of the man you are meant to be. The question is, will you have the courage to answer? Let silence be your tool, not your prison. Speak when it matters. Speak when the world needs your voice. Speak when your soul demands to be heard. Because in the end, the measure of a man is not just in the life he lived, but in the truths he dared to speak. Speak while you still can.